Okay, so you want to own Walmart. Not a franchise. Not one store on the edge of town. The whole company. 2.1 million employees. Over 10,000 stores and clubs across 19 countries. $713 billion a year walking through the doors. You think owning a piece of that is owning the biggest money machine on earth. And you'd be right. Just not for the reason you think. Because on every single dollar that crosses a Walmart register, the company keeps about 3 cents. 3 cents. A street vendor selling hot dogs keeps more than that. So how does 3 cents on the dollar turn into a company worth $900 billion? How does the thinnest margin in retail build one of the most valuable businesses on the planet? Here's the part nobody's selling you the buy real estate, get rich dream wants you to understand. The store is not the business. The store is the bait. Let's start with a number that should scare you if you were actually the one signing the checks. Walmart's net profit margin sits at roughly 3%. For every $100 a customer spends, Walmart keeps about 3. Compare that to a company like Apple, which keeps closer to 25 cents on the dollar, or even a mid-sized software company clearing 40. 3 cents is not a typo. It's the entire model. Because at 3% margin, you are not running a business. You are running a treadmill. Speed it up or you fall off. Here's what that treadmill actually demands. To turn a profit that matters at 3% margin, you don't need a good store. You need a store doing enormous, relentless volume every single day with almost zero waste. A Walmart Supercenter does something like $4 to $5 million in sales a month. Multiply that by 4,600 US stores and you start to see it. The profit isn't hiding in a clever price tag. It's hiding in a sheer number of times that price tag gets scanned. Run the math on a single item, say a 60-cent margin on a bag of rice, and it looks pathetic. Run it across 280 million customer visits a week worldwide, and that pathetic 60 cents turns into a war chest. The store isn't selling you rice. It's selling you rice 280 million times a week. That's the whole trick. Which is exactly why nothing inside a Walmart is arranged by accident. At a 3% margin, every square foot of floor space has to earn its keep, so the layout itself becomes a profit tool. Milk and eggs sit at the very back, so you cross the entire store, past everything else you didn't come in for, just to grab the thing you actually needed. The candy and impulse items at the checkout line aren't decoration. They're the last, cheapest chance to add another 60-cent margin to your basket before you pay. And this is exactly why owning a Walmart franchise was never actually on the table for you. There is no Walmart franchise. You can't buy in at the store level the way you can with a McDonald's or a gym. Walmart keeps every store company owned because the entire model depends on controlling volume and pricing down to the cent in every single location with zero variance. A franchisee with their own incentives is a rounding error the model can't survive. So if you want in, you're not buying a store. You're buying stock. And the moment you buy stock instead of store, you've stopped being an operator and started being a landlord to a machine you don't control, which, it turns out, is a much better seat than the one you thought you wanted. So if the store barely breaks, even on paper, where does a $900 billion valuation actually come from? Start underneath the store. Literally underneath it. Because Walmart isn't just a retailer sitting on lease land, paying rent like every mall tenant you've ever walked past. Walmart owns the dirt. Over 80% of its U.S. stores sit on land the company itself owns outright, roughly 150,000 acres of it, more ground than the entire city of Seattle. That single fact quietly rewires the entire business. Every competitor renting a comparable box store is handing a chunk of their margin straight to a landlord every single month. Walmart's biggest landlord is Walmart. Here's where it gets genuinely interesting. Owning the land doesn't just save Walmart a rent bill. It turns Walmart into a landlord itself, twice over. First, inside the fantasy version, 90,000 square feet of retail sits on top of that land. But the real version has over 10,000 outside tenants, nail salons, banks, fast food counters, optometrists, all paying Walmart rent to operate inside or beside a Walmart building. You walked past a dozen of them the last time you shopped there and never once thought about who was collecting that check. Second, when a location stops pulling its weight, Walmart doesn't write it off as a loss the way a leaseholder would. It sells the land, redevelops the site, or leases it out entirely, turning a failed retail bet into a real estate profit on the way out the door. Losing at retail and still winning on exit. That's not a business model most owners get access to. But even this is starting to shift, and it tells you something about where Walmart thinks the real money is now. Through 2025, that ownership ratio held rock steady near 87% for a decade. In 2026, it dropped sharply, down to roughly 81% for U.S. stores, as Walmart began quietly selling off pieces of that real estate empire through sale-leaseback deals. Translation: the company that spent 60 years buying land under its own stores is now cashing some of it out, freeing up billions to pour into something it considers even more profitable than dirt. We'll get to exactly what that is in a minute. But remember this number, 81% and falling, because it's the clearest signal Walmart has given in a decade about where it thinks its future margin actually lives. Not into the store, somewhere else entirely. You can watch this exact strategy happen in real time. Walmart recently bought a shopping center anchored by one of its stores in Monroeville, Pennsylvania, and instead of just running the store, it's redeveloping the entire property. Apartments, additional retail, the works, on top of land it already controls. In Norwalk, Connecticut, it spent $44 million on an outdoor shopping center just to become the anchor tenant of a property it also owns, collecting rent from the dentist and the salad chain next door while it's at it. This isn't a grocery company that happened to buy some land decades ago and got lucky. This is an active, ongoing real estate strategy, running in parallel with the retail business, and increasingly treated as its own profit center rather than a side effect of needing somewhere to put a store. Anyway, if you're the kind of person who wants the real mechanics behind businesses like this and not the motivational version, that's the entire point of this channel. Hit subscribe because every video on here takes one more business apart the same way, with the actual numbers, not the guesswork. So where does that land money go? Straight into the part of the business that most shoppers never think about at all. The 14,000 or so suppliers who have to get their products onto Walmart's shelves in the first place. And this is where the everyday low price slogan stops being a marketing line and starts being a weapon pointed at somebody else's margin. Walmart doesn't charge suppliers slotting fees the way grocery chains traditionally have. That's true, and it's the polite version of the story. What Walmart does instead is arguably more effective. It makes suppliers absorb the cost of every inefficiency in its own supply chain. Miss the narrow delivery window to a distribution center, and you're fined under Walmart's On Time in Full Compliance program. Fail one of the 63 defect categories in Walmart's quality program, and you're fined again. Ship using your own freight instead of Walmart's. And as of last year, you're paying a pickup charge and a fuel surcharge calculated as a percentage of your own cost of goods, deducted straight from your invoice before you ever see the payment. None of these fees show up on the shelf price the customer sees. All of them show up in a supplier's margin, quietly, month after month, chargeback after chargeback. Here's the part that breaks people's brains about this system. Walmart isn't charging you to be in the store. It's charging you to be imperfect in a supply chain built by a company that has never once needed to be imperfect itself. Picture a mid-sized snack brand doing $20 million a year through Walmart. A real, survivable business on paper. One late truck during a peak week trips the on time in full fine. One pallet stacked wrong trips a quality defect fee. 1 month running its own freight instead of Walmart's trips the pickup charge and fuel surcharge, both calculated as a slice of that brand's own cost of goods, before a single dollar of that shipment ever reaches their bank account. None of these fees are enormous on their own. That's exactly the point. They're small enough that no single one triggers a phone call to a lawyer, and consistent enough that, added up over a year, they can quietly erase a business's entire margin on the account, the exact account that was supposed to be their biggest win. Why would any supplier accept terms like that? Because the alternative is worse. Walmart controls access to more American households in a single week than almost any other retail channel on earth. Roughly 280 million customer visits, globally, every 7 days. For a mid-sized food or consumer goods brand, Being delisted from Walmart isn't a bad quarter. It's an extinction event. So suppliers eat the fees, eat the chargebacks, eat the fuel surcharges, and keep shipping. Because 3% margin at Walmart's shelf still beats 0% margin on a product nobody's buying anywhere else. The supplier isn't Walmart's customer. The supplier is Walmart's raw material. Now here's the twist. Nobody's selling you the boring old retailer version of Walmart wants you to see. All of that, the thin retail margin, the owned real estate, the squeezed suppliers, that's the old engine. It's still running, it's still enormous, but it's not where the growth is anymore. The growth is somewhere almost invisible to a shopper walking the aisles: advertising and memberships. In fiscal 2026, Walmart's ad arm, Walmart Connect, pulled in $6.4 billion, up 46% in a single year. That number alone doesn't sound like much next to $713 billion in total revenue. Here's why it matters anyway. Advertising and membership income together made up roughly 1/3 of Walmart's entire operating profit in the most recent quarters. 1/3 of the profit from a sliver of the revenue. That's not a side hustle. That's the highest margin business Walmart has ever owned. And it was built almost entirely out of data the company was already collecting for free. Think about what's actually being sold here. A supplier who's already paying fuel surcharges and compliance fines to get a product onto the shelf can then pay Walmart again. This time to make sure that product shows up higher in the search results on Walmart's app. It's rent collected twice on the same square inch of shelf space. Once physically, once digitally. And because it's pure data and software, there's barely any cost attached to delivering it. A retail margin near 3%. An advertising margin north of 70%. Same customer, same click, completely different business hiding inside it. Membership works the same trick from a different angle, and it's a trick Walmart borrowed on purpose. Costco has run this exact playbook for decades. A warehouse chain that famously makes almost its entire operating profit from membership fees alone, treating the merchandise as close to break even. Sam's Club, Walmart's answer to Costco, just raised its own membership fee to $60 a year for the basic tier and $120 for the premium one, both still priced a notch below Costco, on purpose to keep the comparison favorable. And Walmart Plus, the newer membership program wrapped around free shipping and fuel discounts, just posted its strongest quarter of new members since it launched. Here's the number that explains why Walmart is chasing this so hard. A Walmart Plus member spends roughly 4 times more than a non-member and visits the site 7 times as often. You're not paying $60 or $98 a year for perks. You're paying Walmart in advance for the right to be a more predictable, more frequent customer. And that predictability is worth more to Walmart than almost anything else in the business. A subscriber isn't a sale. A subscriber is a guaranteed sale on repeat for the next 12 months. It's not just a US story either. Sam's Club China has become one of the fastest growing pieces of the entire membership business, adding members and expanding locations while most of Walmart's other international markets grow far more slowly. Walmart has already pulled out of the UK and Japan entirely over the past few years, closing the door on markets where it couldn't build the scale this whole model depends on. Where the membership and advertising flywheel works, Walmart doubles down. Where it doesn't, Walmart leaves. That's not a retailer making emotional decisions about which countries to love. That's a company reading its own margin data and acting on it without sentiment. There's one more layer underneath all of this, and it's the one that decides whether any of those other 3 businesses can actually function at the speed the model demands. The supply chain itself. Walmart runs 42 regional distribution centers in the US, and it's in the middle of a multi-year project to hand almost all of them over to robots. The system comes from a company called Symbotic, fleets of autonomous machines that receive, sort, and palletize inventory without a person touching most of it, moving product through the building faster and with far fewer errors than a human crew ever could. Walmart has already spent billions rolling it out, with a stated goal of eventually automating some form of distribution for roughly 2/3 of its stores. Here's the tension underneath that number. Walmart insists this isn't about cutting headcount. That automation is about capacity, not layoffs, and that the same 1.6 million U.S. workers just shift toward different tasks. Fewer people unloading pallets by hand, more people picking online orders or delivering them to a doorstep. That may well be true today, but watch what actually happened at the very first automated facility in Brooksville, Florida. Fewer people visibly on the floor, the same total headcount on paper, and a company executive publicly declining to share turnover numbers. You don't spend billions of dollars automating a warehouse to keep paying the same number of humans to stand next to the robots forever. The honest read is that this is a bet on where labor costs go over the next decade, made quietly, one distribution center at a time, while the public messaging stays reassuring. The robots aren't replacing the supply chain. They're replacing the argument for needing as many people to run it. And all of that automation is being built for one specific reason: to make same-day and even same-hour delivery cheap enough that it doesn't quietly bleed the 3-cent margin dry. Walmart says its delivery network can now reach 60% of U.S. households within 30 minutes. That sounds like a customer convenience story. It's actually a margin story. Every online order fulfilled from a slow, human-picked store instead of an automated facility costs Walmart more to deliver than the item is worth in profit. Which is exactly why e-commerce order fulfillment has spent years as one of the most expensive parts of the business to run. Automating the distribution centers and shrinking delivery windows isn't about winning a speed race against Amazon for its own sake. It's about closing the gap between what a delivery costs Walmart and what a 3-cent margin can actually afford to pay for it. Stack it up, and the picture flips completely from where the hook started. The store that keeps 3 cents on the dollar is the front door. Behind it sits a landlord collecting rent from 10,000 tenants and its own real estate portfolio. Behind that sits a supply chain that finds 14,000 suppliers for its own operational demands and is quietly handing itself over to robots to move faster than any of them ever could. And behind all of it sits an advertising and membership business that didn't exist in any meaningful way a decade ago, now generating a third of the company's profit at margins the grocery aisles could never dream of. For separate businesses wearing one blue and yellow sign. None of it runs without the 2.1 million people who show up to make it move. The largest private workforce on the planet, larger than the active duty military of most countries on Earth. And here's the number that tells you how tightly this whole machine is calibrated. The average U.S. hourly associate earns around $18.25 an hour. That wage sits on a tight ladder, a $14 company minimum at the bottom, climbing to around $28 an hour for an hourly department manager, with 92% of the entire workforce paid hourly rather than salaried. 92% hourly means 92% of Walmart's labor costs can be scheduled, shortened, or expanded week to week based on foot traffic, almost like inventory itself. Multiply a wage that carefully controlled across 1.6 million U.S. workers, and you understand exactly why Walmart's operating margin has been able to climb from 3.3% to 4.3% in just a few years, even while total revenue kept climbing into the hundreds of billions. Every fraction of a percent in labor cost, multiplied across 2 million people, is worth more to the bottom line than almost any single pricing decision the company could make. The land is the foundation. The suppliers are the fuel. The advertising and membership businesses are the profit engine. And the wage bill, tuned down to the cent per hour, is what keeps the whole structure from tipping over. So if you bought Walmart stock instead of chasing the fantasy of owning a store, what would you actually own? Not a shop, not a building. You'd own a company that briefly crossed $1 trillion in market value in early 2026, sitting today somewhere around $900 billion, that only keeps 3 cents of every retail dollar it collects, and has built an entire second, invisible business on top of that dollar, one that keeps closer to 70. You'd own the land under a real estate portfolio the size of a mid-sized American city, a supply chain that finds its own vendors into submission and is quietly handing itself over to robots, and an advertising network more profitable, dollar for dollar, than the stores that host it. The blue smiley face was never selling you low prices. It was quietly building a landlord, a bank, and a media company, and letting the checkout aisle pay for all three. Here's the uncomfortable part for anyone still chasing the buy real estate and get rich slow version of this story. The land was never the point. It was the collateral. Walmart didn't get to $900 billion by owning dirt. Plenty of failing retailers own their own dirt too. It got there by using that dirt as the free foundation for 3 other businesses that actually carry the margin: rent, data, and a subscription. The store you can see is the least profitable part of the entire operation, kept alive because it's the only piece a customer will actually walk into. Anyway, if you actually want to see how far this pattern stretches, keep watching, because it goes somewhere you won't expect. Because there's a business you probably stood in line at this exact week. One that looks like the exact opposite of Walmart. Small, local, no supply chain empire, no distribution network, just a counter and espresso machine. And on paper, the margins should be terrible. They should be even worse than Walmart's 3 cents on the dollar. But the numbers behind owning a cafe tell a completely different story about where the real profit is actually hiding. And it has almost nothing to do with the coffee. That's next.